There is a little table on my balcony here in Tagaytay, just wide enough for a cup of coffee, a plate of sliced mango, and my left elbow. The paint is peeling in two places. One leg is shorter than the others, so I folded a piece of cardboard under it about 3 years ago and never bothered to fix it properly. Every morning, before the traffic starts climbing the ridge, I sit there and watch the mist move through the trees below me. Some mornings, I can see tall lake. Some mornings, I cannot see the building across the road. And this is the part I have never said out loud to anybody. I have felt more at home at that crooked little table than I ever did in the house I spent 32 years paying off. I know how that sounds. I have been to 29 countries. 29. I counted them twice before recording this because somebody always asks whether airport connections count. They do not. I mean places where I slept, ate, walked around, got lost, and stayed long enough to form an opinion. I have watched sunrise over the Bosporus, eaten grilled sardines beside the Atlantic in Portugal, crossed Australia by train, and spent a winter month in a rented apartment outside Prague because I thought cold weather would make me feel young again. It did not. My name is Robert Harlan. I am 72 years old. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and worked for a commercial refrigeration company for most of my adult life. If a supermarket freezer failed at 2 in the morning, I was one of the men who got called. Later, I moved into sales, then regional management, which sounds more important than it was. Mostly, it meant more airports, more hotel breakfasts, and more time explaining numbers to people who had already decided what they wanted to hear. Travel became the reward I gave myself for working too much. Every year I would pick a place and tell myself, this one might be different. This one might be somewhere I could breathe. Italy was beautiful. Spain was lively. Thailand was easy. Costa Rica was green and friendly. Mexico had towns where I could imagine staying for a season. I liked all of them. I admired many of them. But admiration is not the same as belonging. That took me a long time to understand. For most of my life, home was an address. A red brick house with a 2-car garage, a maple tree in front, and a basement that always smelled faintly damp after heavy rain. My wife Elaine and I raised 2 daughters there. We hosted Christmas dinners there. We argued about money in the kitchen and made up in the hallway. We measured the girls' heights against the pantry door frame until they were old enough to roll their eyes at us. Then Elaine died. Cancer. 11 months from diagnosis to funeral. There is no useful way to describe what that does to a house. The rooms do not change, but every object becomes evidence. Her reading glasses beside the bed, her blue mug in the cabinet, a coat hanging behind the laundry room door because neither of us remembered to move it before the last hospital stay. After the funeral, everybody told me not to make any big decisions for a year, so I did not. I stayed in the house, I cut the grass, I paid the utilities, I accepted casseroles from neighbors and said I was doing fine. My daughters called every Sunday, and I worked hard to sound normal enough that they would not drive over to check on me. At night, I sat in the living room with the television on and the volume low. I was not watching it. I just needed another human voice in the room. A year passed, then another. The house that had once held a family began to feel like a warehouse for a life that was over. My older daughter, Melissa, wanted me to move closer to her in Indiana. She had good intentions. She found a retirement community 15 minutes from her home. There was a dining room, a fitness center, weekly card games, and a shuttle to the grocery store. The brochure showed silver-haired couples laughing over salads. I toured it on a Tuesday morning. The apartment was clean. The staff was kind. The hallway smelled like lemon disinfectant and something boiled. A woman in a pink sweater sat near the elevator holding a purse in both hands. She looked at me and asked whether the bus had come yet. I said I did not know. She nodded like I had confirmed something important. You are 70 years old, standing in a staged apartment with a fake bowl of fruit on the counter, and your daughter is pointing out the emergency pull cord in the bathroom. You know she loves you. You also know that if you say yes, everybody will feel relieved. Everybody except you. I went home and opened a bottle of beer at 3 in the afternoon. I sat at the kitchen table and thought, is this it? Is the rest of my life going to be a smaller room closer to people who are too busy to visit? That question embarrassed me. My daughters had families, jobs, mortgages, problems of their own. I did not want to be one more obligation in their week, but I also did not want to disappear politely. So I tried everything else first. I joined a walking group. I volunteered at a food pantry. I took a woodworking class and made a crooked birdhouse that no self-respecting bird would enter. I went on 2 cruises. I spent 6 weeks in Arizona. I rented a condo in Florida for 1 winter and learned that sunshine does not automatically create friendship. I even tried online dating. I know. Famous last words. I met a perfectly nice woman named Carol who liked antique stores and hated flying. On our 3rd dinner, she told me she wanted to stay within 20 miles of her grandchildren for the rest of her life. There was nothing wrong with that. It was simply the opposite of what I felt pulling at me. The Philippines entered my life by accident. One night I was watching a video about retirement costs in Portugal. When it ended, the next video began automatically. A man around my age was sitting on a plastic chair outside a small house in the Philippines, talking about his monthly budget. The picture was not polished. A rooster kept interrupting him. He said his rent was 18,000 pesos, which at the time was a little over $300. Then a neighbor walked past, handed him a bag of bananas, and kept going. That tiny moment stayed with me, not the rent, the bananas. I watched another video, then another. Soon I was reading expat forums at midnight and joining Facebook groups full of arguments about visas, hospitals, dating, electricity bills, and whether one city was better than another. There were wealthy men showing off beach houses, but there were also regular people living on ordinary pensions, retired teachers, truck drivers, widowers, former nurses, men and women who had not become rich but had somehow become less afraid. I made a spreadsheet. Of course I did. 38 years around refrigeration sales will do that to a person. I listed rent, insurance, food, transportation, visa costs, flights home, emergency savings, and the price of imported peanut butter. I researched hospitals. I read every horror story I could find. Scams, bad landlords, medical emergencies, relationships that emptied bank accounts, people who moved too fast, trusted too quickly, and discovered that paradise still sends invoices. I was not looking for a fantasy. I was looking for a life I could actually sustain. My pension and Social Security came to just under $3,600 a month. Back home, property tax, insurance, utilities, car costs, and basic living expenses swallowed most of it. I was not poor, but I felt financially hunted. Every roof repair or medical bill looked like the beginning of the end. In the Philippines, the numbers gave me breathing room, but numbers were not enough. I had visited cheap places before. Cheap can feel lonely too, so I booked a 6-week trip. No permanent plans, no declarations. I told my daughters I was doing research, which made it sound responsible. Melissa said, "Dad, Please do not marry anybody. My younger daughter, Rebecca, said, at least wait until the second week. That was the family sense of humor Elaine had left us. I landed in Manila in late afternoon and immediately wondered whether I had made a mistake. The heat wrapped around me like a wet blanket. Traffic barely moved. Motorcycles slipped through spaces I would not have attempted on a bicycle. My driver kept one hand on the horn and the other on the wheel. By the time we reached my hotel, I was exhausted, sweaty, and ready to fly home. The next morning, I left for Tagaytay. As the road climbed, the air changed. It was still warm, but lighter. Fruit stands appeared along the roadside. Pineapples were stacked in neat pyramids. Small restaurants advertised bulalo on hand-painted signs. The city felt busy without feeling enormous. I had rented a furnished one-bedroom apartment for 27,000 pesos a month, about $480 at the exchange rate then. It was more than some expats paid, but it had a balcony, reliable water, decent internet, and a view that appeared whenever the clouds allowed it. The landlord, a woman named Liza, met me with 3 keys, 2 pages of rules, and a container of chicken adobo she said her sister had made. I assumed it was a welcome gesture for new tenants. 3 days later, her sister sent pancit. A week later, somebody downstairs knocked on my door because they were having a birthday and wanted to know why I had not come down yet. That sentence mattered. Why had I not come down yet? Back home, I had lived beside one neighbor for 9 years and could not remember his middle name. In Tagaytay, people I had met twice noticed when I was missing. I do not want to romanticize it. The first months were full of mistakes. I paid too much for a tricycle ride because I misunderstood the fare. I bought the wrong prepaid phone load. I spent an afternoon in the wrong government office because I was too proud to ask the security guard for help. I learned that maybe later can mean many things, and that a repair scheduled for Tuesday might happen on Thursday, unless it happens Monday. The noise took adjustment. Roosters do not wait for sunrise. Dogs hold conferences after midnight. Karaoke can begin for reasons that are never explained. I got sick from something I ate and spent 2 miserable days bargaining with God from the bathroom floor. During a power outage, I sat in the dark wondering why I had traded a dependable American house for a country where my fan could stop in the hottest part of the afternoon. Then somebody knocked. It was Liza's nephew carrying a rechargeable lamp and a thermos of hot soup. He had heard I was sick. I had not called him. That is what kept happening. Small acts. Nothing dramatic enough for a travel advertisement. A cashier remembering which coffee I bought. A barber asking about my daughters because I had mentioned them once. A family at church saving me a seat. A fruit seller putting 2 extra bananas in my bag and pretending she had miscounted. Again with the bananas. After 6 weeks, I flew back to Ohio. I expected relief. Instead, when I walked into my house, the silence felt louder than before. Everything was exactly where I had left it. The thermostat clicked on. The refrigerator hummed. No rooster, no traffic, no neighbor calling from the stairwell. For the first time, the house did not feel like home. It felt like storage. I sold it 4 months later. That decision caused the only serious argument I have ever had with Melissa. She said I was running away. I told her I was running towards something. She said I barely knew the country. I said knowing a place was not measured only in years. We both raised our voices. Then she cried, and I nearly changed my mind. Nearly. I shipped 2 boxes to the Philippines and divided the rest between my daughters, an estate sale, and a donation center. 32 years of ownership fit into fewer decisions than I expected, Keep, sell, give away, throw out. The hardest item was Elaine's blue mug. I wrapped it in a bath towel and put it in my carry-on. I have lived here a little over 5 years now, long enough for the romance to wear off, long enough to know the Philippines is not paradise. Bureaucracy can be maddening. Traffic can turn a short errand into an afternoon. Imported goods cost more than they should. Healthcare requires planning, savings, and realistic expectations. Foreigners who arrive believing every smile means friendship can learn painful lessons. I have learned to say no without apologizing. I do not lend money I cannot afford to lose. I rent instead of buying property I do not fully understand. I keep my medical insurance current and an emergency fund untouched. I ask questions twice. I move slowly in relationships and business. Those lessons have not made me suspicious. They have made me steady. My life here is simple. My current rent is 32,000 pesos, roughly $550 depending on the exchange rate. I spend more than the men online who claim they live like kings on $900 a month, and less than the men who recreate an American lifestyle inside a gated bubble. I cook breakfast at home. I eat lunch at a small place where the owner knows I want calamansi with my water. I use ride apps when I go farther and walk when the weather cooperates. On Wednesdays, I help a local teacher with conversational English activities for older students. I am not a formal volunteer. I just started showing up after she asked whether I could talk to a class about American workplaces. One visit became another. Now the students call me Sir Robert, which makes me feel more distinguished than I deserve. On Sundays, I video call my daughters. The relationship with Melissa took time to repair. She visited 2 years ago with her husband and children. I watched her observe everything: the apartment, the neighborhood, the hospital I would use, the people who greeted me by name. On her last evening, we sat on the balcony while the mist rolled in. She looked at me and said, "You are not lonely here, are you?" I said, "No." She nodded. That was the moment she understood. People ask why the Philippines became home after 29 countries. They expect me to say the cost of living, the weather, the beaches, or the English language. All of those things helped. The affordability gave me options. The climate gave me more days outside. Being able to communicate made the transition easier. But none of those things is the answer. The answer is that here, I became visible again. In Ohio, I had become Elaine's widower, Melissa and Rebecca's aging father, the retired refrigeration man, the neighbor who kept his lawn neat. Those were true descriptions, but they were all connected to a life that was shrinking. Here, I was the new man who needed directions, the American who could not pronounce menu items properly, the older fellow who carried groceries for the woman downstairs, the guest at a birthday party, the person missing from the table when I stayed home. I was not important. That is different from being invisible. Home, I have learned, is not the place with the most history. It is the place where your presence changes the shape of the day, even in some small way. I still miss Elaine. Moving did not cure grief. Grief packed itself into my luggage and came with me. Her blue mug sits beside my coffee jar. Some mornings I drink from it. Some mornings I cannot. But grief feels different here. Back home, every memory pointed backward. Here, memory sits beside something new. A message from a student, a neighbor asking whether I want soup, my granddaughter sending me a picture of the snow while I complain that 24 degrees Celsius feels chilly. I have not escaped aging either. My knees hurt. I take blood pressure medicine. I think more often about hospitals than I did at 60. I know there may come a day when living here becomes harder, and I refuse to pretend otherwise. For now, though, I wake up with somewhere to be. That is worth more than I understood when I was younger. This morning, the mist was thick. I sat at the crooked table with coffee in Elaine's blue mug. Down below, a delivery motorcycle coughed to life. Somebody was sweeping a walkway with one of those short brooms that makes my back ache just watching. A rooster announced a sunrise nobody could see. Then my neighbor called up from the stairs and asked whether I was coming to breakfast. Not whether I wanted to come, whether I was coming. I looked at the folded piece of cardboard under the table leg, the peeling paint, the wet leaves shining along the balcony rail, and I thought about all the hotel rooms, rented apartments, cruise cabins, airport lounges, and beautiful places where I had once imagined starting over. 29 countries. And home was the place where someone noticed I had not come downstairs yet.